I'll take advantage of the natural lull in the conversation. It's actually 7 o'clock right on the dot. So if you could find a seat, come on in. So happy to see all of you here. This is really exciting. So my name is Kathleen Flenniken. I want to welcome you to the Jack Straw Cultural Center for this Jack Straw Alumni Reading Series. I have been thinking about something like this for a while. There are people in our reading tonight who were sort of slightly instigators, which kind of got the ball rolling for me. It was like, oh, I really do need to do this. So I couldn't be more excited about it. We actually have 6 readings scheduled. Six readers with each reading, actually a seventh reader in the last one. And it's a chance to celebrate new books by Jack Straw alumni. And so you might imagine if we have 37 readers who wrote back to me and said they wanted to celebrate a new book, you can imagine there's a lot of exciting things going on here, even though there aren't as many venues as there have been for readers. And so I'm happy to be part of getting that rolling again. So our readers tonight are Wendy Call, Kevin Kraft, Erin Malone, Anastacia Renee, Jeanine Walker, and Julene Tripp Weaver. It's a great group. And I want to thank you all so much for coming, and I want to thank our listeners who are listening in. I want to begin with our land acknowledgement. Today we meet on the lands of the Duwamish, Suquamish, and Muckleshoot nations and other Coast Salish peoples, past and present. The staff, board, and artists of Jack Straw Cultural Center acknowledge that we are living, creating, working, and playing on the traditional lands of the first people of Seattle and the Salish Sea, and we honor them and the land itself with deep gratitude. I also want to say thank you for a number of organizations that help support Jack Straw: Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, For Culture, Washington State Arts Commission, National Endowment for the Arts, Arts Fund, Lester and Phyllis Epstein Foundation, Rainier Institute and Foundation, and individual contributors. And I want to say thank you above all to the Jack Straw Cultural Center, to Levi Fuller and Joan Rabinowitz, without whom none of this would be possible. And I want to thank our engineers tonight. Oh, yes. Let's thank Joan and Levi. Yeah, all of our readers here know Joan and Levi well, and they know what really important people they have been to the writing community. I also want to say thank you to Zeos Green and to Aaron Shellman, who are our engineers tonight. And this reading will be live streamed on Facebook and YouTube, and it will be archived on YouTube, so you can refer friends to it later on. Okay, we're going to get started. We're going to have 3 readers. They're each going to read about 10 minutes. Then we'll have about a 5-minute break, and then we'll have 3 more readers. So we're going to begin with Wendy Call, who was a Jack Straw writer in 2008. Wendy Call, she, her, wrote the award-winning nonfiction book, No Word for Welcome, co-edited Telling True Stories and Best Literary Translations, and translated 3 collections of trilingual poetry by indigenous Mexican women. She lives on Duwamish land, southeast Seattle, and Mixtec Zapotec land, Oaxaca City, and teaches in the Rainier Writing Workshop. Please welcome Wendy Call.
See if I can get this down low enough. There we go. Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you, Kathleen, for making this happen, and Jack Straw for hosting us. I'm going to read 1 poem each from 4 different books. I did not write in the sense of originally writing any of these poems. And actually, the first poem that I'm going to read, I didn't even translate. So I think of myself as a writer of nonfiction and a translator of poetry, and also a really enthusiastic anthologist. I really love creating anthologies. And this book I'm going to read from first is the first in an annual series. I actually just sent the second edition of this book to the publisher less than 48 hours ago, which will come out in a year. And so this Best Literary Translations Anthology is a collaborative effort. There are 4 of us who are co-editors, and each year the guest editor is a different person. And I just want to read one poem from it, sort of in honor of anthologies, and also to mark what is happening in Palestine right now. It just happens that the first poem that is in this first edition, which came out in April, is by a Palestinian poet. So the poet's name is Najwan Darwish, and this poem was translated from Arabic by a really wonderful poet and translator named Karim James Abu Zayed. And the name of this poem is Near the Shrine of Saint Naum. I stood in the red church, its tiny domes like buds, blossoming in stone. I stood near the saint's resting place, while a tourist laid her cheek on the tombstone to hear his beating heart. But I was no tourist, and the saint left the room with me. And the church the builders wrote in his memory was nothing more than a passing dream in his eternal sleep. The tourists come in vain, as do the believers. So it's a poem by Najwan Darwish. And next I'm going to read 3 more poems, one from each of the books of poetry in translation that I've published in the last little over a year now. And if that sounds productive, it's only because I started working on these translations, the first ones 14 years ago. And it's really, it's hard to get a book published in this country. It's especially hard to get poetry published. And it's super extra special hard to get poetry in translation published. And maybe it's even harder when what you're asking the publisher to do is to publish a trilingual book, which each of these 3 books I'm going to read from are. 2 of them are by the same poet. Her name is Irma Pineda. She is indigenous Zapotec from Oaxaca, Mexico. She still lives in her hometown. And she and I have been working together, bringing her poems into English since actually around the same time that I did my Jack Straw Writers residency in 2008. And so what I'm going to read tonight is one of the very first poems of hers that I translated, and it's the title poem of this book, In the Belly of Night and Other Poems. And this is actually a funny coincidence. I translated this poem in order to read it at a reading I was giving at Seattle University that was hosted by Sharon Cronin, Sharon Cumberland, who was one of my residents, I guess you would say, in the 2008 Jack Straw Writers program. So this is called In the Belly of Night. In the belly of night I move. I seek a wise sea turtle porter of 1,000 years, a sea turtle, devourer of earth, deep drinker of days, guardian of all nostalgia, to heal this soul that pains me so, to drink the tears these shadows pour on me, to pour sunlight on this sadness of mine. I seek a sea turtle who will give me her sharpened teeth, her iron house, her gate stripped of rage and haste, and her footprint of light on the earth. And so I mentioned that these are trilingual books of poetry. And the reason that they're trilingual is that their authors, in this case, Irma Pineda, publishes not quite all, but nearly all of her work bilingually in a language called Dijasa, which is also known as Isthmus Zapotec, and in Spanish. And then I work from the Spanish versions to bring them into English. I've been learning Isthmus Zapotec for the last only about 3 years now. So when I translated the poems in this book, I only had access to the Zapotec versions from the poet sort of helping me through the Zapotec versions. And I should also mention that the poets I work with, none of them read or understand English, so they just have to trust me with what I'm doing with their translations into English. Although I do go through each translation with them, and I essentially translate them back into Spanish to explain what decisions I've made. Because at this point, with this book by Irma Pineda, the title in English is Nostalgia Doesn't Flow Away Like River Water. I first translated this book before I started to learn Dijasa, and then I went back and revised all the translations once I was up to sort of having reading knowledge of the Dijasa. And it was really interesting to go back and retranslate poems after I was able to work from both originals. And so I'm going to read one poem from this book. This is a book of poems that are persona poems. There are two voices. So half of the poems are in the voice of a person who has left their home community in southern Mexico and traveled to the United States to work as an undocumented worker. And then the other half of the poems are that person's partner who has stayed home in southern Mexico and is awaiting their partner's return. And one of the things that the poet accomplished in these poems, which is quite amazing in Spanish, is that there's no gender assigned either to either partner. You can just imagine, the gender that you would imagine as you're reading. And that is really interesting because that's very hard to do in Spanish. It's a very highly gendered language. Zapotec is not a gendered language, and so it was sort of a natural part of the Zapotec that then Irma was able to reproduce in Spanish, and then I reproduced in English. And this is a poem that doesn't have a title, and is my favorite poem in the collection. And it was really hard for me to get this individual poem published. And so I think the 21st journal that I sent it to accepted it. And it was actually a German journal that publishes in English based in Berlin. So I just decided that people in Berlin were more sophisticated or something. But I felt very vindicated when the poem was finally published. The houses of your village have eyes that seek the beach's sand grains. In the distance, they see the sun that doesn't shine on their heads today, doesn't brighten their shingle tresses, painted black, red, and soft colors. Who lives under the pink or yellow roofs? Who is in those dark houses? Winding toward the mountains, the only visible artery of your village's body disappears, perhaps because it's the path that leads to the sea. Gloomy village, showing only one mouth door, painted red. Where did its lifeblood go? Did its unbearable silence scare away the dogs? There are no children in the street, not even robbers prowling the roofs. Even the birds have gone away. And you might be wondering about the word shingle tresses in this poem. And that is there because the words for the part of a house in Dijasa are the same. They mirror the parts of the body. So the roof of the house is hair. The windows of a house are eyes. The mouth of the house is called, or the door of the house is called mouth. So I decided to bring that into the English. And this book is a book that I really have to thank Jack Straw for. This was published in January, and fairly late in the process, the publisher Milkweed decided that they wanted to do an audiobook. And this is by a poet named Miquea Sanchez, who is from Chiapas, Mexico. She writes in a language called Zoque and also in Spanish. And she has published 7 books of poetry that are bilingual, Zoque Spanish. And she is the only woman ever to publish a book of poetry in her language. And her language is in critical danger of extinction, so she's working very hard to make sure she's not the last woman to publish a book of poetry in her language. And she's mentoring a number of young poets, a couple of whom are women, I should say, who are quite close to getting books out. But Jack Straw's role in this book was when Milkweed said, hey, we want to do an audiobook, and we want you and the poet and the other person who translated some of the poems in the book to read it, and you have 2 weeks to get it to us. And I thought, oh my, I'm not really sure how to do that. And I called Jack Straw, and Levi said, you're really in luck. We just had a couple of cancellations, and so you can come and record the audiobook Monday if you want. And so I had 2 afternoons here, and before that I had 2 days to learn how to pronounce a whole bunch of words in Soke, because there are a number of the poems that have Soke words in them. And so the poet recorded the words for me, and then I spent the whole weekend listening to them and trying to repeat them. And the poem I'm going to read from this book is the title poem. It's called How to Be a Good Savage. And it's also the title of one of Miqueas's 7 books, and the title of this book. And there is one Soke word in this poem, which is girawa. And a girawa is generally a person who's from outside the community, and it's most often used to mean a white person. How to be a good savage. My grandfather Simon wanted to be a good savage. He learned Spanish and all the saints' names. He danced before the church and was baptized with a smile. My grandfather had the force of red thunder, and his nahual was a tiger. My grandfather was a poet who healed with words. But he wanted to be a good savage, learn to eat with a spoon, and the girawa's electric lamps impressed him. My grandfather was a powerful shaman who spoke the gods' language. He wanted to be a good savage, but he never quite learned how. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Our next reader is Kevin Kraft. Kevin Kraft was a Jack Straw writer in 2008 and a curator for the Jack Straw program in 2015. Kevin Kraft lives in Seattle and directs the Written Arts program at Everett Community College. His books include Traverse, Lynx House Press, Vagrants and Accidentals, UW Press, and Solar Prominence, Cloudbank Books. He recently served as a writer-in-residence at UW Rome Center, as well as for Olympic National Park. Editor of Poetry Northwest from 2009 to 2016, he is currently executive editor of Poetry Northwest Editions. Please welcome Kevin Kraft.
Thank you, Kathleen. Let me raise this up here a little bit. There it is. Thank you, Kathleen, for the invitation to be here. I'm thrilled to be back in Jack Straw with Wendy. We were here together in 2008, and Judith Roche was our den mother then. And of course, we had a nice memorial service for her here, reading here in Jack Straw. And I get to read tonight with Erin and Jeanine, who were among the poets I brought into the program in 2015. And sort of, I think the books they're reading from tonight sort of began in those stirrings. And so it's really kind of a full circle moment for me. I think of this place as kind of like the black box theater for baby poets, you know, like we get to come and try things out, work our voices out. And it's really an honor to be back here tonight. I'm going to start with a poem called Curriculum Vitae. I don't know why I titled it Curriculum Vitae. I guess I was thinking about all the things that don't get into a resume when I wrote this poem. It starts sort of in pandemic time, which you will recognize. And it sort of winds, you know, remember that sense of suspended time where like, it's suddenly seen, and we didn't know where things were going from there or how long it would be that way. And I think that's like my natural preferred state of things, like, okay, let's just exist like everybody, everybody's in their home and let's just all get along like this. This would be nice. But I just thought about time dissolving and sort of winding back the clock. So this is kind of a time lapse poem in reverse. The quiet this evening, avid, a void one could lean into, a stillness, a willingness in evidence and darkness sweeping up the canceled street. I don't know what I heard nothing. New leaves on the dogwood, pinched in prayer, the magnolia shedding petals like a handful of chapbooks, returning the favor. A recitation of doorknobs, the 10,000th lap of a stationary bicycle, a stadium of cardboard cutouts. Remember that? Cardboard cutouts in the sports stadiums. Grass growing in the parlor, grass growing in the parietal lobe, a nursery of nurses, a documentary of doctors, the orderly, the hardest job to master, on the prairie, waving beneath the city, the hour, always later than you think, suddenly, sidewalks outlined in chalk, acres of hopscotch, mapping every leap. I count myself lucky, I count myself out. A dozen eggs hatching in a boil, animals reclaiming their former ranges, a swarm of houseflies, oreodonts grazing vacant lots. If I were you, I'd run for it, I'd reign for it. Emptiness, a plaza, a gangplank, moon snails climbing the sill. I thought I wanted to start with a floodwater poem because, here we are between atmospheric rivers. We don't know what we're going to find when we leave here tonight, So Traverse is a book, it's many things, I think, sort of braided together. But one of the things that it is a book of family origins. And I was an adoptee, and I sort of grew up with a sense that I was also something other than I knew, something other than I was or am. And that was sort of a shadow mystery that accompanied me everywhere I went. And you couldn't do anything about it back then, before the internet, when records were all locked. So I just remember sort of, looking for clues or hints of my family story, my family origins, in anything that had mirror-like qualities, like geological time, for instance, or in this case, the fate of schoolyard friends. This is a poem called Basin and Range, and it's a sort of a biocoastal poem. It starts in a schoolyard in New Jersey, where I grew up. It ends out here on a road trip from Washington into Oregon, so you'll hear some place names that you recognize in that regard. And it's sort of me sort of exploring this, the larger sense of family that I think being an adoptee, the mystery of it gave me a sense that, well, if I don't know what the one thing is, maybe it's everything, that expansiveness. Basin and Range. No place we've lived, but the lake dries out, just as the swan dive begins. No one to raise his hand when the teacher calls roll, 6th grade heart pumping donated plasma. One day he's there, the next we're reading about leukemia and what are the chances a boy outlives his broken blood. Poor Mike. That's what we said in the quiet corners of recess at the stone-kicking edge of the field. Bloodline, lifeline, a hand held out, someone to read it. What have we missed? Once, after school, I took a screwdriver to my thumb, drawing just enough red to press into my best friend's likewise self-inflicted wound, our two thumbs stuck together, fists interlocked in brotherhood forever. It's what we heard you did if you wanted to hew close to this world long enough to look back, wondering which absence still holds you in its aching limbs. The lake dries out, taking with it poison carp, jump rope, whoever walked on water. When I first call the agency to glean what I can about my own sealed medical history, the woman on the landline notes with strange satisfaction, well, an uncle has 4 kidneys. True story. That's one way to cobble a secret society. Details to line our pockets, a surfeit of risk and ward, but no names. A biography in outline only, hole in the ground, thermodynamics, yesterday's kestrel, hovering over an inland sea. Before marrow, there was mar, 2 A's, double A, mar, the tough ring eroded of basalt snarling water in a gusher of steam. Today, I drive a dusty sedan through basin and range toward its planned obsolescence. Fort Rock, Summer Lake, lonesome, lives inside us like an island we can swim to, dreaming. Terminal, the playa, meaning no outlet, but sinking or evaporation, water stitching salt to silt like a sworn pact or residue of alien memory, blood in another boy's vein. Well, eventually, the records did come open to a certain degree, and one step in the family discovery process was getting a report from the agency of everything they knew while they were busy writing birth parents to see if they would consent to, or see if they were still alive and would consent to a visit. And in that process, I discovered that I had a full genetic sister that I never knew before. So that was like, well, okay, so there was a shadow person there all along, not just my imagination. And so this poem is a poem that takes that fact, it doesn't dwell on it, but it stitches it into the sort of lived reality of my Greenwood spring, let's say, and sort of, again, stitching family together in any place I could find it. Neighborhood watch. Down the avenue, trees are muttering the dialect of shade. Dapple, split, decision, fuse, scant shade for a bipedal April afternoon, sun and who can sense it growing restless, hanging out of windows when the leaf blowers come with their backpacks spewing noise. Oh, those leaf blowers, I hate them. The joggers wrapped in neoprene, the walkers pulled by sled dog determination to the next fragrant blade. My sister digs in 2 states south, shepherding the last of 4 daughters across the high school parking lot. Another sister, born again in every cloud or sudden gust, leaf on heart, unraveling the doctrine of signatures. I've given up on brunch. I'm holding out for the next great oxidation event. The trees give up their whisper campaign now the swallows have returned. Tree swallow, I say in my glad language. Look, the day came clear and the magnolia sounding off, lifting leaky cups. There's a nosegay to warm the occasion. There's a napkin for every nosebleed. The old world order is beneath us. What do we keep in a loop? My brother concocts dipping sauces. He owns a restaurant. Our mothers comb the beaches for table settings. Our fathers left unscathed. A lineage of sawmills spreads among the bungalows, stumping for the forest here before. Buckle the roadbed, argues the big leaf maple. Love, I say, in my green language, nose to ground again, leading. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. Our next reader is Erin Malone, who was a Jack Straw writer in 2015. Erin Malone is the author of Site of Disappearance, finalist for the National Poetry Series, and Hover, as well as a chapbook, What Sound Does It Make? She served as editor of Poetry Northwest from 2016 to 2020 and now works as a bookseller on Bainbridge Island. Please welcome Erin Malone.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Kevin, Jeanine, all my other friends here, including one I've known since we were 14 years old, which quite a long time ago. Made it out for me. Site of Disappearance is something that I started here in 2015 with Kevin, and I didn't really know what it was going to be yet. I was just sort of having these impulses toward a poem, a long poem, I thought, and then it became book length eventually, but it did take me about 7 years to get there, and then another few years to publish it. Anyway, as Wendy said, it does take quite a long time sometimes. I feel like I need to give you a little background about this before I read the poems. It is a memoir in verse, so if you were to read it, it would make more sense to you if you read it from front to back instead of dipping in to the book. It braids together 3 stories. The first is the death of my brother when he was 11 from heart disease. The second is that on the day he died, the body of a missing paper boy was found in our small community in Nebraska, about 30,000 people, sort of a bedroom community of Omaha. And coincidentally, my brother and this boy were buried next to each other because of timing, I imagine. And their obituaries were next to each other in the paper. So the third story is really about how I forgot these events. And then when my son was reaching his adolescence, I began remembering, and I needed to go back to my childhood home and get into the archives and do a little bit of research in order to write the book. Biography. My brother was born blue and quiet, not unlike the sky, and like the sky he lived exposed. Blueberry mouth, blue eyes, his heart tied in a bow, the river threading his wrist, a slow river, lazy boat, his heartbeat, his echo, lived, his name scribbled in my books, his hop-step laugh on the loop of our neighborhood, trailed me, bugged me, his leg brace, his bracelet warning, labels, his sirens, his strokes, he lived, his freckled skin, his surgeons, his open heart, his staples, his scars, his tracks, this sky, he lived, for 11 years he lived, and then. Martial arts. At the start of every lesson, the teacher asks, "What's your best defense in a dark alley?" Upstairs, our son swings his legs, kicking neatly like a clock at the quarter hour, kick, kick, punch into the teacher's palms, while we wait in the bar below, knees touching, watching the news with the sound off. Someone is wailing, but the sound has left her body. Don't go down the dark alley. The kids stomp, and behind the bar, the bottles chime, a tremble that ripples back to the center of itself. Sirens pulse across the woman's face, the yellow tape, a border keeping what no one wants to know. My right knee against your left, a small pressure we've built our house around. Everything I'm afraid of, I'm about to name. On this day in history, September 21st, 1983, and I should say that this poem uses found text and language from the Omaha World Herald. Crucial wreckage is recovered in the Sea of Japan, while closer to home an unheard of summer freeze, 8 degrees at sunrise, means failure to potato crops. Futures drift lower, and area searchers find the body of the paper boy missing since Sunday. The neighbor lady makes us pancakes, a little sugar dusted over them. We are still preserving the scene. It's Wednesday, a school day. I'm trying to get ready. In Beirut, one shell strikes a garden gate and another hits a swimming pool. There has been substantial damage. When my brother in a hospital room begins hemorrhaging, the phone rings, the neighbor turns her back to me. Time widens to a dial tone. The Returned. They've come through the rain with leaves stuck to their shoes, hungry, popping cabinets open and shaking the cereal boxes. They eat the last of everything. They don't wonder if the fish at the bottom of its blue pebbled bowl is asleep or dead. Nothing is dead. Like the insides of teacups, they gleam. Never drowned or hunted, they have no wounds on their bodies. They are where they left off. So how can we explain our constant longing for touch, following and kneeling at doors closed to us, wanting to know what can't be told, faces pressed to keyholes, each room a diorama, the dressers, combs, and the little shells. And I'm going to just read two more poems. This poem is the sort of the center of the book, and it describes me traveling back to my childhood home. And I won't read the whole poem. It is several pages long, and it sort of dissolves into lots of space on the page, and it's hard to pronounce. So, and it starts with an epigraph from Chase Twitchell, who said, "You can't translate something that was never in a language in the first place." I took my son to kindergarten. I walked him to school. I let him walk while I watched from the window, and in that quiet chewed a nest. My questions as yet without residence, marking me, my body covered in hives, brought to light. Whatever begins with demand. In order to rest, must first be examined. Thousands of miles in an easterly direction, a train and I kept time. Between the radio's silences, rain connected the side of one state to another. Because we are a river town, it is natural to start at the river. Mouth of my childhood, I walked through the meadow, the cemetery, a tree farm, a middle school hall at the bell, pushed by, sidelined. My nickname was Mouse. Overheard a drill. Make yourself as small as possible. Protect your neck and throat. And someone counting down. Boy in a hospital bed. Boy in a freckled field. I went because I have a son at home, the day's collection in his pockets, acorn, leaf crumb, pink eraser, leaf crumb. In the sparrow's white eye ring, an eye ring of frost, in the frost-starred brush, a bruise. Where the field assumed a shape, the searchers found their answer. And I'd like to leave you with a poem that I wrote about my son. And it's called Translation. Down from the ladder of sleep, my son comes, taller than the night before, and I a fraction smaller, allowed a one-armed hug. Next door, an earth mover is chewing up the scenery, its vibrations in the cages of my eyes, yet the animals aren't rattled. The knots of his knees disguised in new muscle, he comes down from his loft in solid form and says, "Do you know trees are 90% air?" As if I haven't spent years standing here, holding my breath. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. So we're going to take a 5-minute, not 10-minute, but 5-minute break and have 3 more poets. I invite you to go take a look at the book table out in the hall. All of our wonderful poets are selling their books tonight, and I hope you will think about going home with some wonderful new books. So we'll see you back in 5 minutes. going to ask you all to find your seats. I keep trying to speak into the microphone, but it does not amplify. It's actually just recording, so. Great, thank you for coming back. We have 3 more wonderful readers to share with you tonight. Okay, our next reader is Anastacia Renee, who was a Jack Straw writer in 2014 and a curator in 2020. Anastacia was not able to bring books. She's come from New York. She has to travel light, but she wants you to know that you can get her books at the bookstore, or you can get in contact with her and she can arrange with you to get a book to you. So I want to make sure that you know that. Anastacia Renee, they, former Jack Straw 2020 curator and Seattle civic poet, is an award-winning writer, curator, interdisciplinary artist, and speaker. She is the author of Side Notes from the Archivist, HarperCollins Amistad, selected as a New York Public Library Best Book of 2023, and feature of PBS.org's My Brief But Spectacular Life on Poetry and Legacy. She is also the author of Black Ocean, and Forget It, Black Radish, and Here in the Middle of Nowhere, HarperCollins Amistad. Anastacia Renee is the recipient of the James W. Ray Distinguished Artist Award Prize in Literature, and she was selected by NBC News as part of the list of Queer Artists of Color Dominate 2021's must-see LGBTQ art shows for Don't Be Absurd, Alice in Parts, which I saw and was amazing. Mixed media installation at the Frye Art Museum. Please welcome Anastacia Renee.
Hi, y'all. Y'all is y'all wherever I am. So I'm so happy to see you, so happy to be here with you. Thank you for kicking this series off. I was one of those people that was like, yes, include me. So excited to be here with all of you former Jack Straw folks and just friends and writers. I don't talk between poems. I just read. So I guess what you should know is I'm reading from Here in the Middle of Nowhere. And in this book, Lucille is God. And there's a big God, Lucille, and there's a lot of smaller gods, and they are also Lucille. And Lucille is a Black woman. And also there's several universes happening all at once. So I can't read for you the time jumping in the book, but know that the poems that I am reading are coming from the characters in the book, because this book is primarily fiction sprinkled with poetry instead of hybrid poetry. And you will not hear anything else from me except the work. Thank you for listening. In the beginning, Lucille was God. I pour sun tea in a mason jar with uneven chunks of ice and put the tip of my tongue on the barrel of the straw and sip it slow like an invocation to myself. I like to run my piano fingers against these turquoise shutters slow so I can feel what they are communicating to me. Could be secrets, could be making plans, could be letting in the light, could be sounding off a warning, could be just a shudder. I like to sit like a right angle, 90 degrees and slightly slouched here with a piece of dress under my butt and the rest of it hugging the tops of my knees, fanning my fan every which way and staring right here at my tree. I like to be barefoot with my legs wide as the Milky Way and my sweaty hips sunk deep enough to leave an imprint of myself, and the black blades of my shoulders pushed into the cushion's floral design like grass, and then I rest an eye for a spell. But as soon, and I mean as soon as I do that, bees come buzzing and bumbling around me, and I have to flap the pockets of my dress, and baby, I jingle. Just a little bit, because I always keep change somewhere deep in the crevices on each side. 5 pennies, 9 dimes, and a shiny $2 sterling silver piece. And I sit and sit and sit some more here on this porch, watching over my tree and you, visitors, all the time. I am Lucille. I am the mother of all the Lucilles, of all of you. God, in this place, in the middle of nowhere. You want to know if I'm a star here? Yes, a luminous one. You want to know how many Lucilles are mine? 6. You want to know how many times they've each been around the sun? You want to know if you can see them? Yes, here in the middle of nowhere. New Parish Elementary School, as told by Gigi, aka Glinda the Good Witch, at school talking about the vampire girls. The black vampire Lisas don't talk much. At lunch, they communicate through milk and red jello, the language we all understand but do not care to bond over. One Lisa pokes a hole in her chocolate milk, but not where the hole should be. And the other vampire Lisa unwraps her straw with her incisors, not with her fingers, and that means she's saying, we hate lunch and we want it to be Friday. And we all know this is what it means, but we're not allowed to talk to the angry black vampire girls. Our parents and most adults tell us that we should stay away from them, that they will just be angry and want to suck our blood. But I wish they would talk to me. I wish I could be a black vampire girl, but I am just a witch like all the other witches, and these are the 2 reasons times 2 that no one wants them here. And I'm telling you this from the smallest cafeteria table in the corner where you go if you are misbehaving, because I wrote, "What would Lucille do?" on the board in big letters to show I want them here. But they just keep sipping milk and playing with their fangs. Sharp. We grew fangs in the absence of hugs. Every opportunity to touch grew a fang. Every opportunity to talk grew a fang. Every opportunity to come together grew a fang, until we were all covered in fangs, and that's when the fangs began to grow beneath our skin, and before we knew it, we adapted to distancing and ripping every opportunity for anything which involved contact to shreds. So much time has passed that most people don't know what it's like without fangs. What it's like to hug your sister or a neighbor around their neck and kiss them on the cheek without drawing blood. Gumbo. And then you stir the left breast and shrimp and sausage and right ovary and okra and bones and tubes and put your nose in the gumbo and you called it yourself. Every mouthful a jaw of iterations. Every swallow a shell so soft it tenders as meat. Gristle so malleable and messy it slops right through to you, to y'all, to us, to her, to visitor, to them, to me. Bloody Mary's creation story. I was born from the vagina of a retrograde volcano and breastfed off the land of Oz. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. The ease of the yellow brick road bent around my skin, an ankle bracelet, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. For the circumference of missing magic, my blood a nautilus for the heat of souls that still remain. You call me all the time, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. I was born from the mouth of a rumor with a rotary telephone as gums and Morse code as a birthmark on my fontanelle. Daddy was a swirl of baba and bullshit, which gave me half the time it took to be a whole being. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. When I sucked rumor's tits, words grew as adjectives and tried to live my life, red and blaring and dialing all the right digits each time spewing, hello, hello, hello. You've called Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. And God so loved the world, she put her hands on her hips and sang a song about DNA spirals like curls dangling from her parted wet scalp. And me, I was right there with you from the beginning against the very end of her line. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. I started as a gurgling tooth and broke through as a canopy of butterflies, but swarming like bats, not out of hell. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. Lamentations not for loss or regret, but for wiggly growing pains which never had a fleeting chance to root. Bloody Mary. Last piece. Everyone gets a solo in the choir of grief. If she doesn't get a chance to grieve, she will choke on her own disappointment and lie down with a demon's liver, and she will ask the demon for it, something more able to handle her own unwanted toxicity. Grief as a compost bucket festers for the in-between and the living, the deliberate decay of a thing fermenting, how it can make you crave it like expensive cheese from the neighborhood co-op as a mortuary. If a person is dead, you can place flowers on their headstone. But if a person is alive, you can only picture them as a bouquet. Grief as an accessory. You are wearing grief around your neck, a tiny teacup ascot saucering on your Adam's apple. Sipping here, sipping there, tiny little sips of grief. You are wearing grief like a vintage cardigan all together and keep it pushing, and you would never know, buttoning here, unbuttoning there, tiny hanging on by a thread buttons, missing whole buttons of grief. You are wearing grief in the best shade of lipstick. Put it on slow, a lovely mat of purple bruises, lining here, puckering there, tiny little kiss marks of grease. When is there time for the Black woman to fling her frankness? Tiny flinging frankness here. Tiny, flinging frankness there. Grief as a yo daddy joke. Yo daddy, so dead on your birthday, he calls you from the grave. Ha, ha, ha. Grief as a Zoom happy hour conversation. Raise your glasses and let's toast to getting out of bed today. Hand clap emoji, heart emoji, TikTok filter, viral, 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 off-camera cry. Grieving makes you hangry, makes you scarf the skin off your bones, makes you pick hindsight from your wisdom teeth, makes you feel nauseous with all the feelings spiraling down. Grieving makes you want to diet and blame your need for control on the anorexia of your heart's refusal to keep you down. Grieving makes you crave sugar and salt, anything at all to coat the nakedness of your shivering buds, always sprouting to find the familiarity of taste of being born sweet again. Put the past under your tongue. When it melts, pretend to swallow it whole. But then, to grief, think how many rows of cotton were not picked with your own hands. Be grateful for the living. Say thank you to grief. Thank you.
Thank you, Anastacia. Our next reader is Jeanine Walker, who was a Jack Straw writer in 2015. Jeanine Walker is the author of The Two of Them Might Outlast Me from GPP. She has received fellowships from Artist Trust, Jack Straw Cultural Center, and Wonju, UNESCO City of Literature. Her poems, essays, and translations have found homes in Poetry, Pleiades, Prairie Schooner, Had, Denver Quarterly, and elsewhere. Please welcome Jeanine Walker.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thanks to all the readers tonight. It's been really beautiful. And thanks to everyone for being here. This is a good full room, standing room only, thanks to Raul. There's a seat, I think, if you want it. Okay. But I know this has taken an immense amount of work for Kathleen to organize this whole series. So let's give a round of applause for Kathleen. Okay, so I launched my book, The Two of Them Might Outlast Me, last March, and it's about the dissolution of a family and finding a way through that to make a new kind of home. So I'm going to read one family poem, but I'm going to focus first on some poems that represent a different thematic thread in the book. When I was about a month out of high school, I lost someone who was really close to me to suicide. And he was a really special person whose presence that last year of high school provided a lot of comfort and calm and fun. And of course, it was that sort of new kind of home that I had been looking for. Matt was immensely kind and an extremely talented artist and musician, and someone I deeply loved. He was hilarious. He was a true original. And in so many ways, to so many of us, he was really larger than life. He was 17 when he died. I had just turned 18. And we went to school together. We worked at the movie theater, the AMC Hampton 8, still standing, and we served popcorn to people. And we spent almost all our free time together after school. For about a year. So I'm going to read a few poems from that time. Okay, the first poem is called I Stopped. My street blackens as an eye, and I watch, wanting shadows dark as passing fingers over eyes, to crawl and craft your name, to spell the word I've said, made mine 1,000 times. Your suicide. It slapped me. My body shook, my hands let in, and in my room, silenced, I sat and held the phone. Oh God. I stopped. Below, a man began to mow. Dad was out of town. A robin hummed a tune, and I sat still, without a voice, unused to terror, thinking, what? And thinking, Matt. I later saw your sister. She wasn't you. Although that day I held onto her hand. Okay, the next poem is called The Next Morning I Received the Call. I stood in my polyester vest, a size bigger than I needed, the smell of partially hydrogenated soybean oil thick in the fabric and the air, and picked up the phone behind the concession stand, my thumb and index finger folding its cord over like a note I'd slip into your locker between classes. I don't remember now what the fight was about. We always waited it out, didn't talk, and a few days later were fine. Conflict resolution was beneath us, too frou-frou. We never even considered prom. I didn't dial. I hung the phone up, released the cord from my grasp. My heart crumpled like a note unread. What does it matter, I thought, what he's doing tonight? And this one is called Checkup. I met you in heaven. Finally, after all this time, we met again. The grass was green and bright, and when you smiled, I saw that you had been smiling all of these years. Your teeth were clean and bright. We started dating again immediately. I wanted to ask, aren't you dead? But I didn't. I didn't dare to see, as Dickinson says, the soul at the white heat. I guess my telling you this proves the fact. No, you did not experience it with me. You did not come back with me from beyond and let me sit on your lap again and take off your glasses. The phone call that morning did not tell of a failed attempt. No, baby, you succeeded. Okay, so I'm going to read one of the family poems in here called Piano. And I did think to read it because of Matt, actually, because he was such a talented piano player. He used to come to our house and like sit down and play Rachmaninoff on the piano that, you know, we played Blue Boogie. Do you know that song? I don't know. I mean, that was hard too, I guess, but Rachmaninoff kind of takes it. So anyway, but this poem is set a lot earlier than that, so it's early childhood for me. And this is a different piano, different music. So it starts with an epigraph by my father, who had posted, for some reason there was some conversation about that piano amongst my brothers on Facebook. I don't know, pre-COVID, so I don't know, 50 years ago or whatever that was. And my dad hit enter before he finished writing it. So he wrote, I took that piano apart piece by piece, the sound. Board was cracked and it would not stay tuned. So of course I heard a line break. Some days he watched, her back straight as the fall board, wrist lifted just a small breath from the edge of the keys. My mother's music filled the living room, the hall, her notes dancing, divorced from the staff, as if they had 100, 1,000 children more. The 3 they had sat enraptured, quiet now, listening. My father stopped too, stopped the life he was accustomed to, and smiled, slight, knowing a secret, a man in love. Other times his eyes didn't see, or they saw financial security, a far-off land, unreachable with music, his teacher's salary, or the extra change he made delivering bread. His mornings not for sleep, but for keeping our heads pressed into pillows as he went out into the night and drove loaves from factory to doorstep, then entered his classroom somehow, awake enough to demonstrate how the derivative of the cosine is negative the sine. Sometimes her notes were a song that foretold our downfall. Bills each year more than they could afford. With each dollar gone, there went a new shoe. Here came the thread my brother used to sew a shirt that passed from father to son, to brother, to me. In those notes, in her strict wrists, in the minor descending key, she made the soundtrack of our fleeting home. Togetherness decayed at an insolvable rate per year, as Dad stayed here and Mom went there, until the hammers struck the strings a final time, and we were dissolved into the last lilting notes of the air. I took that piano apart, my dad wrote, piece by piece the sound. The sound of her playing stayed too long in his head, so with his hands he took it out until the song was wood again. Okay, so I'm going to read, I think, two more. Yeah. All right, so I had mentioned that the book was a lot about the dissolution of a family and finding a new home, and so these last two poems are kind of what a new created home might look like. This is called A Door. A door slammed. The door was a way home and a way out. You saw the door as a way out, and you stepped out into the world of heat. I saw the door as a way home, and I lay on the couch admiring the walls. You were out in the world. Your journey was a perilous one. A parrot parroted to me. What journey isn't perilous? What journey isn't rough? You were inside a journey, and you closed up your suitcase like you were zipping up your past. Fear is the rumble of a feather as it falls from a bird's nest. A feather is made from the wheels of a truck that carries promises taped up in boxes. On the couch, I admired the walls and their steadfast ability to keep me from you. When I touched the wall, it was a parrot asking me, what journey isn't perilous? I was inside and the heat was not on me, nor did I have a past to enclose. The door slammed. It was not you coming home, nor did I expect it to be. I was in a journey within our home, and it became my home. Okay, and last one with a nod to Wallace Stevens, I become a nest. One must have a mind heavy in thought to gather shadows like eggs in an apron. Captured, they yield. I move to quash their gloomy nature. Slatted cupboards, mouse holes, knots in trees, vineyard arches now pull in light like a poem. But no, it's just fantasy. Shadows secure a propensity to multiply, whether I wrap them up or not. One must have a mind heavy in thought to keep shadows like eggs in an apron. Shadows wet the ground they walk on. Anguish makes an apron damp. But for me, I find true, when I shoo dark shapes into my folds like children beneath an attic's eaves, I become a nest for the resting shadows. They crack, they birth, they fly away. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanine. Our last reader is Julene Tripp Weaver, who was a Jack Straw writer in 2023. Julene Tripp Weaver worked in AIDS services for 21 years. Her third poetry collection, Truth Be Bold, Serenading Life and Death in the Age of AIDS, was a finalist for the Lambda Literary Awards and won the Bisexual Book Award. Her latest book is Slow Now with Clear Skies. Please welcome Jeanine Tripp Weaver.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for organizing this wonderful series. I couldn't be at the first one, but I'm intending to be at them, and I thank Jack Straw. And 23 was a amazing year because it was right at the end of the pandemic, and a lot of poems in this book were written during the pandemic. So there's a lot of pandemic poems, family poems, and the chaos of the times poems that are in here. I'm going to start with the poem that I submitted when Catherine asked us to send her a poem to put in the book, a short poem. So, New Age Wonder. Make a ritual. Gems heal. Find a petrified tree, a quartz crystal in a creek. Reminders of wonder and belief. Life force spirals. Find solace in water, in stone, in gentle rainfall. Breathe peccacore released from earth. Touch a moss-laden nurse log. Feel the pulse of the moon, the rising of the sun, star glitter in the sky. Elemental, essential, a world your body understands. And I'll read a poem of place. In 1988, I first visited the Northwest before I was even contemplating moving. And so this is a poem of place, and it mentions the farm in Tennessee. And if you, just so you have a sense of that, it's a commune, or what today would be called intentional community, in Tennessee that Stephen Gaskin started. And it's the home of tie-dye, and they brought back midwifery, and they brought in tofu, and they did a lot of work with Central America. So it was a real potent image, and we had this dream we were going to live in intentional community when we moved out here at some point. So, so this is called Northwest Mineral Springs. Seeking renowned, remote hot springs, wild space to soak naked, we found one near the Columbia River, backwoods, known to locals, warned of the gnarly path, reminded to pay the parking fee. Heated pools of mineral water we set with a traveler who lived at the farm in Tennessee. A rare summer day of freedom. Glints of silver in the waterfalls across from our sequestered rock hovel. Salmon jumping upstream. Interloper from the East Coast, could I believe my eyes? We moved closer to see their silver shimmers. Oblivious to us, they swam instinctual and urgent, in cold, icy water to spawn and die. We dipped our toes into their running river, satisfied we returned to our soak, a mere mile from Carson Hot Springs, where they piped this very water into white porcelain tubs and charged a fee for what we indulged in for free. So I'm going to jump a little bit to the moment of diagnosis, which there's a line in it that is after Lucia Perella, and the only thing you need to know for this is the wise woman tradition has a 6 steps of healing, and the first step is the 0 step, and that's referred to in this poem. The moment of diagnosis. For now, I'll just stand in the courtyard. For news is news, and I have the wisdom of the 0 step, the do-nothing step, the stillness to listen inside, the now to gather and hold this body erect, to stay quiet and wait, drink water, watch the sky and the trees grounded in the earth, to know what to hold on to. Sure, anger comes and fear, but the trees guide a hidden disease. There was a moment I did not know, different yet the same. For now, I'll just stand in the courtyard. The diagnosis hit like a tailgate strike, a scathing jolt, a wake-up crash, whiplash. But there is a way to forgive, to stand with trees, to grow a gradual acceptance. A sliver matures in stillness. Time passes, moves on to what transpires next. On a tree, leaves come and go. This process, cycling to a calling that opened to a career that came and went. I survive like the trees in their daily standing. It makes sense, this emotional stew that stormed my life. A personal study, how to midwife the specter of death. Grateful to the trees that absorb pain, they would accept even my blood if I had to bleed. I stand today, one of the lucky ones, me and the trees and I, in this courtyard. And the next poem is an autobiographical poem. And at AWP in Seattle, I believe it was, I don't remember what year, it was just here again. I went to a reading and a workshop with Sandy Weisenberg, and she had us, she told us, she had us do an exercise. It was a workshop and a reading. And the instructions she gave us, I went home and I did. I looked up the year I was born, and I got a bunch of facts from the internet, and then I wove them into this poem. So it's autobiographical in that sense, and it's 1952, Water Dragon is the title. Born in the year airbags were invented, 3 of 5 American families owned a car, one car. My father drove 20 miles to work. Dwight Eisenhower won the election. I didn't know. Nor the Korean War, nor the Cold War. At school in northern Appalachia, we didn't do drills, didn't hide under desks. Sheltered, we visited family in the city. Fun outings, exhaust fumes smelled sweet. My family didn't suffer the Depression. My grandfather worked, but still a child of hoarders, a child of the nuclear bomb, fear in my mother's voice. Born in a water dragon year, an early boomer, my father wounded, my uncle a nervous breakdown in World War II. My great-great-grandfather fought on the north side of the Civil War. A patriotic family, a singing in the rain, Gene Kelly, splash, splash, girl child, skirting country and city, wearing dresses. Between wars, my father's Purple Heart. In the attic, he adored me. Mother confused me. Unaware of the many paralyzed by polio, Dad and I did milk runs to Grandma after Daddy came home from work. Mother married at 19, 20 the average in 1952. This is another short one. Learn to love. A new world is on its way. It started at Woodstock with Vietnam protests. Long hair rebels took off into the blue sky on motorcycles, forever nomads. Now how many live in RVs, on the move like Romani travelers, changed by necessity, far from the standard American capitalist lifestyle, way beyond the reach of the buzz. We travel through life and time, make a path, create our heart home. We carry each other, hold hands, learn to love. This one is, I've read from some 3 sections. The book's divided into 3 sections. The first section is kind of the chaos in the world and a lot of pandemic. The second is more family poems. And the third is more what it's called revolutionary, and it's more about the herbal work I've done and the wise woman tradition, oral tradition that I come from with my beliefs. But this one is from that early section, so it's called Those of Us Who Aborted, and it's a prose poem. We came out of broken homes. Our fathers died or went to jail. There were few role models. We grew used to making our own decisions, fast early, distracted into sex, afraid of sex, wanting but not wanting. We knew it all. Blown up in our certainty, we would not get caught until we were. Nothing we could do wrong or right. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. And we were lucky to have an escape hatch. Abortion legal so long. We had that luxury, took it for granted. We hid our secret. It was shameful what we did. Caught, sluts. We might have been raped. We were ruined. We gave it away and it went awry, determined no more. We were getting to know our bodies, how the pill made us sick but kept us safe. The Copper 7 was a trial we could survive. The Dalcon shield ruined our uterine wall. Some of us survived. Men in our life supported us or left. Our families bent in or away, deserting us to the streets. Some of us had jobs, others not. We begged and went to work the same day our wombs were scraped. We had a partner with us or a girlfriend, or we went alone. We knew women used to die from this, and we didn't know if it would kill us. We were babies. Some of us had our tonsils removed, ate ice cream. Others never had surgery, didn't know you could walk in and walk out. We were a mess or ultra-confident. We were angry, wanting a child, but the timing was off, or we knew this was the right decision. We wanted to believe in something. Mixed with emotions that plagued us, did anybody understand? There was not enough time to make such a decision, but limited time to make it. Crunch now to 0. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Julene. I want to thank all of our readers tonight: Wendy Call, Kevin Kraft, Erin Malone, Anastacia Renee, Jeanine Walker, and Julene Tripp Weaver. Please, let's give them another round. Thank you all so much for coming. I want to remind you that there are books out there. You need to go to the author of the book to work out the, how to buy it. But hope you will, and thank you so much for being part of this community. Thanks. Thank you.